Morning, everyone. My talk is about a recent attack on crypto exchange employees and services. So my name is Heungsoo Kang, and I work for Line. Line is a mobile messenger company with over 165 million monthly active users. And based on the user numbers, we have lots of services too. And among them is crypto and fiat exchange named Bitbox and BitMax. So people can buy and sell Bitcoins and alternative cryptocurrencies. And we have a lot of security engineers in our company. We care about security very much. So about this talk, the background is earlier this year, some of you might remember that Coinbase announced that they were attacked by a very sophisticated targeting attack using 0 days of Firefox. And it's described in Coinbase CISO Philip Martin's blog, Coinbase blog and Philip Martin's tweet. And there's another decent analysis by objectc.com. And it's not disclosed, but Line was also targeted. So the goal of this talk is to share the perspectives of the victim. So how it looked like to the victims, and perspectives of the attackers, what they had to prepare, how discreet they were, how serious they were preparing, and about the blue team, as us, what we could see and we could not see. And also to share some more information about the malware they used, and a little bit about the attackers. So the first perspective is the victims, how it looked over the surface. A little bit about the victim. Only one employee was targeted. He's a very talented developer. He has 10 years of experience. He has worked in global companies in Silicon Valley. And his device is iPhone and MacBook Pro. So the attack started from an email conversation. One day, the victim receives an email through his personal Gmail account. If you look at the sender is nm603@cambridge.ac.uk. And it was actually from Cambridge University. We checked the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, and the headers were indicating that it was actually sent by the real account from Cambridge. And there's a link to cambridge.ac.uk. If you browse it, there was just a simple explanation about some prize. And the content is about, he is an organizer of a prize called Adams Prize. I had no idea at the time, but it's some economic prize, and they are looking for field experts to help them decide who to win the prize. And there's a LinkedIn profile in the end of the email with a nice signature named Neil Maurice. If you look at the LinkedIn, nice looking guy named Neil Maurice has 100+ connections. And his career fits to the story very nice. He has years of, he describes his career as years of experience as a postdoctoral researcher and organizer committee from University of Cambridge. Actually, at first we thought this profile is legit, and we thought this guy was being impersonated. So the victim had no idea, and he shares conversation with the attacker without any doubt. Okay, hi Neil, what can I do for you? What kind of service do you need? And Neil Maurice guy replied, thanks for a prompt reply. We'll send you more information on what you need. And after some conversation, he gets a link also to cambridge.ac.uk, and he gets a temporary ID and password. And of course, this is a temporary password. The attackers emphasize to change the password after you log in. because of security reasons. So the victim visits the URL with his everyday Chrome, but he sees a warning that this browser is not supported. It used to happen a few years ago, but not anymore, right? And it has a link to Firefox official webpage, download page. The web page is saying you should use Firefox to browse this page. So the attacker said, oh, maybe the coder is not so good. So yeah, why not? He visits the Firefox official page, downloads the Firefox newest version, and browses to this page to get a login page. So with Firefox, the web page shows up, and he tried to log in, but the ID and password didn't work. This is actually a copy of a legit university website. They added some JavaScript and HTML code. And at this point, the Firefox downloaded the exploit, and Firefox was already exploited to install a malware in the victim's MacBook. So Firefox was exploited, and the shellcode used curl or CRL to download the first stage malware. In this way, it doesn't trigger macOS Gatekeeper. If you're familiar with macOS or MacBook, if you download some executable with your browser, when you try to execute it, Gatekeeper of macOS will warn you, are you sure you want to execute this? You downloaded this file with Chrome at this time. So the attacker used this command line tools. In this case, it won't trigger macOS Gatekeeper, which is weird. So it never triggered any warnings to the user. But fortunately, the attack was stopped here. It was detected and suspended. There were some red flags based on lots of indicators and in-house tools. So it was quite fortunate. So what did we do with the victim, the guy who was hacked? We started interrogating him. Why did you do this? Did you try to endanger our company? And it's a joke. We know it's very hard to block this kind of attack. And the victim, we talked to the victim and we tried to understand how and when and where the attack started. And he helped us a lot to identify, to get the whole picture. And we followed up and we set up a fake environment to run the first stage malware and try to get to see what they were after. So we set up a fake environment with a fake corporate network, which will show the same external IP address. And stage one actually, we noticed that it sends some system information and user information, but it didn't do nothing for quite some time. But after some change of environment, they downloaded second stage malware. So afterwards, the malwares were identified as variants of Netwire and variants of Mox. The names don't really matter much, but it's useful for identifying the attackers. So that was the perspective of the victim. About the attackers, what the attackers had to prepare, what they actually did to make this kind of attack successful. So first, they would have to prepare weapons. In this case, they used 0 days of Firefox. And every modern browsers are sandboxed. They should have prepared at least 2 sets of weaponized exploits of remote code execution, like exploiting JavaScript engine and getting out of sandbox. And they would have to prepare malwares too. Stage one is they use stage one to report victim information and do additional commands as commanded. So it's a scout. It's a small binary with low detection. If you're familiar with malwares and APT campaigns, it is very natural to divide malwares into stages and put every important function to the final stage, or even divide the final malware. And stage 1 is designed to be very quick and detect what kind of security software the victim is using, and have low detections, change every time you use. And second stage is full remote administration admin tool that is designed to do make the victim's laptop just like yours. They would have to prepare infrastructures or servers. In this case, they separated every role of servers into different countries and different servers. For C2 servers, for stage 1, they used a VPS service in Uruguay from qhoster.com. For stage 2, they used a UK server and US server. Also, they prepared a server to host malware to let the shellcode download using curl. And the server was from Russia. Another server they prepared is to host the exploit. The exploit was downloaded from a separate server too, from ovh.com from France. And they bought a domain for it. And payment for the servers are accepting, they're all accepting credit cards and, of course, Bitcoins. And they would have to hack accounts. They had actually access to at least 2 accounts from Cambridge University, which is NM603 and GRH37. The method of hacking the accounts are not disclosed. They could have used phishing on individuals, sending email links, the links to let the victims log in with their own ID and password, or they could have used credential stuffing, like using leaked ID and password, or brute force, or DB compromise. They have not disclosed how they were attacked, so we can only guess. By the way, the university has a bold service, very useful for attackers to use as OSINT. Anybody can list accounts of every account in the system. This is named Jackdaw. And if you search for example, A, it will list every account that starts with A. So it's very good for collecting actual accounts. And both of our victims were also searchable from the service. Also, if you have a university account, of course you get an email account, but you also get a personal web page hosting service. So people.ds.cambridge.ac.uk/yourid will become your personal homepage. You can host your research papers, you can host your profiles. This is a very common thing for universities. I had mine back in my university too. So this part, email accounts with Cambridge domain and web page hosting with Cambridge domain, gives the attackers very much credits. That was why the victims and we thought, oh, this is a Cambridge link. This must be Cambridge domain. But in fact, they could host anything in the web page. And of course, they would have to prepare the website, the fake login website of Cambridge. They copy-pasted the authentic code from Cambridge University, and they added some JavaScript and HTML, and added a link to load the Firefox exploit. The code would be, please use Firefox if you're not using Chrome, based on some indicators of their own. So this is a script code from the fake website. Excuse me. So if you look at the JavaScript code, it shows, it detects the browsers and the operating system. So if the OS is Mac and the browser is not Firefox, it will display a little gray box that looks like this. Your browser is not supported, so please use Firefox to download the page. And another condition is if you're using Mac and Firefox, then load /script.js from root. So that must be the exploit, because it only loads when the operating system is Mac and the browser is Firefox. Yeah, so this must be the exploit. But it was not. It was actually returning 404. We were looking for if there's a hidden JavaScript inside the response, but it was not. It was actually real 404. It might be fake motion, or it might be remaining code from their previous campaigns. So maybe a pump fake. The actual exploit was loaded here. At the end of the HTML code, it loads HTML JavaScript from analyticsfit.com, which is a domain they prepared to make it look very normal. Almost every website has Google Analytics.js at the end of their document, and it's using HTTPS. So we do monitor networks, but we don't have access to encrypted HTTPS connection. And after that, they prepared John Doe, the fake accounts, using the accounts they hacked. The hacked accounts were NM603 and GRH37, so they made up names: Neil Maurice and Gregory Harris. GRH might be really Gregory Harris, but NM603, the real owner, has a different name. I've contacted the owner, and his or her name is quite unique. So maybe didn't find out what the real name were, or they made decisions to use a very common name. And they joined LinkedIn. They make a profile, and to fit the story as a university staff. And they added connections, more than 100. And like I do, I always just accept every LinkedIn connection requests. They did actually have more than 100 connections. And prepare the email and write a nice signature, add a link to website and LinkedIn. And then start operation. They will look for targets. They look for cryptocurrency exchange employees or somebody that has lots of Bitcoins. And they send email to start an operation by sharing conversation. And this part is based on assumptions, but they would evaluate targets. They would only select targets that are really actually has values, and guide only the selected targets to the exploit page. How I assume it is, there's another guy named Robert Heaton, and he wrote about the attack because he was also receiving the same emails. And he wrote a review on how he almost got hacked by the same attackers. He communicated with GRH37, and he never was guided to the final exploit page. So he was selected as a target initially, but for some reason he was evaluated out. So this is the email he shared, and he says he never heard of the attacker during this conversation, saying that I'll look for it, and he never replied back. So afterwards, he heard about the attack on Coinbase and wrote on his blog, why didn't the attackers say, like, please use Firefox for this page? So I have no idea, but why didn't they do? I would have definitely used Firefox to download it. And funny thing is, actually attackers did it, and he was never guided. So he never had a chance to see this page. So after the exploit works, it will download stage 1 malware, and the attackers or operators would look at the machine of the victim and see what's in there, and maybe download stage 2 or ditch the victim. So the final goal would be go for profit, stealing Bitcoins. That was the perspective of the attackers. And the third one is the blue team. It's a short one, what we can see or we cannot see. It's a cliche, but all blue teams have too much to see. There are a lot of employees from many countries. We have a huge infrastructure, and we have hundreds and thousands of virtual servers running. We have our own internal AWS-like system. But we have some methods we can use. From infrastructure level, we can monitor all network traffics and make decisions out of it. And there are some solutions that allows you to see through HTTPS connections, but most of us and your colleagues would hate it. Blue team would be able to see all the passwords you type, and I would hate it too. And from endpoint, there's EDR or antivirus or patch management system. And there are a lot of monitoring solutions out there in the field too. And there are honeypot solutions, and we have our own honeypots too, and sandbox solutions and IOC, indicators of compromised service. If you're not familiar with it, it feeds a service of suspicious servers or suspicious domains, suspicious file hashes. And to harden the authentication of internal network, we can apply network segregation or air gapping, or apply authentication with two-factor authentication, like using SMS. And we can also apply desktop virtualization to monitor every behavior of the employees connecting to important systems like servers. And there are more and more. We can apply everything, but we should think that we should try best not to harm the productivity of our colleague developers. Some of the pain points the attackers utilized for blue team is they sent an email to the victim's personal Gmail page. The email was never saved to our corporate email server, and they used legit Cambridge domain, both on email and website. And the exploit was through HTTPS, sent through HTTPS, and their C2 binaries were encrypted, which is common. And this detection of both stage 1 and 2 malware was very, very low. The stage 1 had only one detection from 360, China, and stage 2 had no detection at all, based on VirusTotal. And the malwares were using C2 connections through port 443, which is a HTTPS port, but actually the protocol was not HTTPS. And to lower the suspicion, they diversed the use of servers to multiple countries and multiple services. And this is a pure assumption, but the stage 1 malware didn't download stage 2 for quite time until I moved my fake laptop out of my corporate network. And when I got home, it downloaded stage 2. It might be coincidence, or they might have waited to avoid corporate network, monitoring system. Some breadcrumbs we could use were the shellcode was using curl, but it was downloading Mako binary without HTTPS server. So for the network monitoring system, we could see the actual Mako being downloaded by curl with user agent string as curl. And the communication was made to suspicious IP addresses like VPS, small business of VPS services. And we could monitor a new executable file. Of course, this is a very noisy flag to watch, but it could be a tip when it's combined with other flags. And we had security team enough resource to analyze and follow up. Plus some other undisclosable indicators and methods that I really not like to disclose, but because they could just bypass it easily. So that was the perspective of the blue team. And some information about the malware, stage 1 and 2. Stage 1 malware is, of course, a macOS malware named NetWire. This is a commercial remote administration tool, and you can buy it online, monthly $15. And if you buy it, it's actually an agent builder. You can set up your own remote server, where to connect. You can even add authentication to prevent someone else to get in the middle and hook your victims. I got a screenshot of this from YouTube because I didn't want to pay. And the hash is as follows, and it was downloaded from a VPS server as a name of Icon Services Agent, which is it actually exists in macOS system as a default service. So it's using a fake name, which is very suspicious. And the C2 server is still up, but the port is closed. It's not getting any more connections. But of course, they can open it anytime they want. And the binary is not signed. I put it because I did some of their previous operations, and from Windows operations, they always sign their Windows binary with a valid digital certificate, which looks like they have purchased it from a, mini businesses, like a fake business. But for macOS malware, they didn't sign the binary. The C2 protocol is analyzed and publicized online from this GitHub URL. But either this is too old or the attackers customized it because the command was XORed with E3 and the commands were quite different. The function for handling C2 command is at offset 4109 if you're interested in analyzing it. So some of the functions it has is a quite common function for malwares, but it reports the user and host information, the username and versions it's using, and it reports its external IP to identify actual victims or actual network is actually in a corporate network or not. It connects to check IP, doindns.org, and parses current IP address. And it can list running processes, and it can start a remote shell. It can search or write or execute a new file. And there's a heartbeat indicating server that I'm alive. This is a packet capture, actual packet capture, and for the first byte, it's the C2 server is commanding the victim to send the initial info, and the big bunch in the middle is encrypted buffer of sending username, hostname, install time, external IP, etc., etc. And after that, it was just pinging a heartbeat until I moved my laptop to my home, and it was downloaded afterwards. But too bad I couldn't capture the packets. The persistence it used, which is after you reboot, you still want your malware to run again. The persistent method is using launch control of macOS. So it will hide this binary in a discrete location and add it to launch control, which will let the binary run every time it boots. And it also adds to login items. So this finder is a fake finder, and this is actually a malware. And it also adds a signal handler. So in case it crashes or it dies or it gets a signal to kill, it will instantly restart itself to prevent dying from crash. And of course, it downloads stage 2. After downloading stage 2, the attacker initiated a shell and left some commands. And inside the shell history, because they used bin shell, they left a shell history file indicating they downloaded malware stage 2 to temp folder and added executable access to it and ran it. For stage 1, there's a very unique string called named HYD7U ... This is actually a RC4 key. This is a key for decrypting some buffers. And this netwire binary contains in total 4 RC4 keys. Only one of them is HYD, and it doesn't change. It was used once for decrypting %rand%, which is probably from here to decrypt that buffer. So if you Google this string, you can see lots of some analysis files on this campaign. And those of you, if you have VirusTotal intelligence access, you can search with this string on Retro Hunt. I don't have access, so please send me the result if you're quite generous. And stage 1 variants on the download server of their campaign, it's still up, and the Apache is still up too. And I brute forced the server using DIRB, and I found some variants from the server with these names. I brute forced until 4 bytes of alphanumeric keys, and the other things like code is all the same. It has different RC4 keys, but all of them has the first RC4 key, height 7. So some analysts in Japan call this campaign height 7 because they don't have a name yet. So these are variants. I was told that the slides will be uploaded online. You can search if you're interested. I already uploaded to VirusTotal, and I uploaded to another server that you can download. So tinyurl, brute down too. So that was stage 1. And for stage 2, the hash is as follows. It had no detection at the time. It was downloaded by stage 1. The binary is identified as MOKS, name MOKS, and they have used Qt. It's a Qt-based binary. So they have binaries in macOS and Linux and Windows. They have operated in mostly Windows, and this time the same source code was ported to macOS. So it's a remote admin tool, and C2 server are as follows, and the ports are closed. But the second one is alive and port is open, but it's not sending payload. I'm not sure if it's synced. The second one is a domain named athlonforfree2updates1.com, which is a very suspicious name. It has a certificate, which is a shitty certificate. It's not valid. So it's built with Qt. So the binary is really huge. It's 13 megabytes. I tried to identify as many functions as possible using Flirt, building Flirt. I downloaded many versions of Qt libraries in OpenSSL and Cocoa, everything else, and try to identify static linked functions, but only up to 20% was identified. And this binary is not signed either. And it copies itself to random names, which they try to look normal, like App Store, Store Account Daemon, and Spotlight, Spotlight D, Dropbox, Skype, Google Chrome, etc., etc. It selects randomly one of these names to copy itself. And persistence is same as stage 1. It adds itself to launch control. And because Qt is a application developing SDK, it will be it will show itself from Docker, macOS doc, which is at the lower part of macOS. You'll see a bar with running processes, just like Windows. So it adds an environment variable to tell Qt not to add itself to the macOS doc. So it won't show up here. And it has a function to search for files. It will look for documents and Excel files. I added the screenshot because this function is exported, and the function name was actually named by the attacker. So I Googled this class name and function name, but I couldn't find anything. But I think they made a mistake to leave a function exported. And more about the campaign. They have actually no name until recent CoinCheck attack, which they successfully hacked very much amount of Bitcoin from Japanese cryptocurrency exchange. So they referred it as hide 7 because of the string of RC4 key. And they have a very long history of attacks. They were known for attacking banks and undisclosed financial businesses, which referred this way, probably banks. And it was introduced in FireEye Trend, and Turkish analyst Mirza Rika. I talked to him like 2 weeks ago, and they were very active in Turkey. Also, there's a analysis on Exatel, and the last attack on CoinCheck was analyzed by LAC. They referred to this campaign as Hide 7. So they like to start their initial compromise with spear phishing. Until now, they used Office document with macro and Office one-day exploit using EPS, or WinRAR one-day exploit, or it could say 0-day because it was quite unpatched for some time. And this time they used Firefox 0-day. Their favorite method is to hack university accounts. Previously, they hacked London School of Economics. I don't know what they have with British, but they like to hack British universities. And they used this account for email communication. And the content was quite similar. We need field experts like you as jury for bank awards. This is a screenshot from the email. Same, another campaign, using same methods. And they abuse university web hosting service for phishing. If you see the link, it's Miami University with an Emil account, and the document was hosted there. So network monitoring or the victim will see Miami College, Miami University link. And they're not afraid of making conference calls with the victims. So they actually talk to the targets. Sometimes they call them and if it's not working, please allow the macro to run. Or in this case, they talked to the victim to remove suspicions. And of course, use LinkedIn account just as this time. Except this guy, the hacked account was Salvalaggio, and they found a LinkedIn account named Matteo Salvalaggio, and they just added this link. So this link is this LinkedIn account is actually valid. He was just impersonated. Also, they hacked Angelina College and used their email account for their campaign. They like to use university or college accounts. Maybe they have some common flaws, 0 days of their own from university websites, or they just like to do it because university web pages are very often vulnerable. No idea. And their favorite VPS, or virtual private server, is OVH and LeaseWeb. So for this attack, they used OVH, LeaseWeb, King Server's Q hoster is from all around the world. But from their previous campaign, they like to use OVH, which is from France, and LeaseWeb from UK. And other services they use only once. So why our victim? At first, our initial guess was they wanted to hack our crypto exchange services. But I talked to a guy from Binance, and he said he met the guys, security researchers from Coinbase, and the emails were actually sent to Coinbase email server and not to the personal account. And they had lots of same emails to multiple employees. So attacking single employee, in our case, to his personal Gmail account is not the same. And I assumed they attacked a lot of exchanges at the same time. But as far as him and they know, no other exchanges were attacked. So maybe they were targeting our individual employee instead of the exchange itself, because they have a history of attacking individuals that looks like to have many Bitcoins. And I have no idea our specific employee had any disclosures of having many Bitcoins, but something might have triggered their senses. So, conclusion about the attackers, they use decent social engineering. It's very hard to discriminate this kind of attack. They use compromised university accounts. They are very responsive in email communication. And they use zero-day or one-day exploits or just Office macro. And they like to use undetected malware. And for Windows, they sign their binary, and it is very hard for antivirus to detect when it's signed. And the operators look to have very much experience. They're very skilled. So as a countermeasure, what can we do? How can we prevent such kind of attacks? But this is a very difficult question to answer, especially when the attackers are very discreet like this. And as much effort the attacker puts on their attack, the blue team should too. We can elaborate every sensors, every utilities we can utilize as long as it doesn't hurt productivity. And which means not only endpoint protection, but network monitoring, honeypots, and suspicious new files, plus other indicators. And it is also best to apply defense in depth, of course, which is emphasized everywhere. So if we could not stop the attackers at one point, we could stop them in another somewhere else or sometime else before they fulfill their purposes. And third is user education. User consciousness is very critical too. If at some point the attackers may have a weird point, a point that looks unusual. So in this case, actually, if you look at the LinkedIn profile, the PhD period is 2 years, which is kind of weird. He's either a genius or something's wrong. And it is very uncommon to offer the users to use Firefox instead of Chrome. It happened when many people were using Internet Explorer, but for Firefox and Chrome, it doesn't work very often. Means it works for both, most pages work for both the browsers. So we are very putting many resources to educate our users, show them what kind of attacks, how they attack the victims to raise the user consciousness. So we should minimize the risk, of course, while maintaining usable security. We don't want to hassle with the developers and our fellow colleagues. And that's the talk I prepared for today. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, we'll move on to the slide of questions then. The first question is, were you able to track down the purchase of the 0 days? Any interesting information gained from that?
At first, you might have noticed that the RCE bug, not the sandbox bug, but remote code execution bug, was reported by Google Project Zero and to Mozilla, if I remember right. So many people were very interested if either Mozilla was hacked or somebody in Google sold the exploit, or someone in the middle, like HackerOne, sold the exploit. But who's the guy who found the bug? The Google guy who found the bug had a chance to review the exploit from Coinbase, and he tweeted like that the vulnerability is same, but based on the triggering exploit, it looks like it was coincident to find the same bug. So he Grope, I think his name was Grope, and he thinks the exploit was just to have the coincidence to exploit the same 0 day. And we were not able to track down the purchase of the 0 day. They definitely bought it somewhere, but we have no idea.
Okay, thank you. JD, if you're in the audience, could you please collect your prize from us behind? We still do have time to take questions on Slido if you want to do it now. We do have another question. Did you come across any of the Windows versions of the malware variants or commands used, for example, certutil or bitsadmin, to download stage 1?
I had no chance to analyze the Windows versions malware, but if you search with the RC4 key string, because this campaign doesn't have a name yet, except the Hide 7 name from Japan, search with the RC4 key string, and it has many non-English from like Turkey or Eastern Europe analysis files, and all of the binaries are Windows binaries, and they have hashes too. And since I don't have VirusTotal intelligence, too bad, so I couldn't download any of the files. But if you do, you'll have access with the hash to the Windows files. And based on the analysis of the documents that I Google translated, they have many same functionalities. Like of course, the NetWire one is a commercial one, so they're basically the same. And the MOX, which is stage 2, is also Qt based, so and built from the same source code to different platforms. And we didn't have any Windows versions attacking our system yet. Maybe because we have most of our users or employees are using Mac. Not most, very many part of our victims using Mac OS.
Do you have a hunch of who could be the threat actor behind this?
Sorry?
Do you have a hunch of who could be the threat actor behind this?
I don't have any guess, but based on the Japanese Coinbase CoinCheck, they were attacked with macro-enabled Office document, and if you write your own Office document, it sets there's a information about the language of your operating system, and it shows that it's written in Russian Windows, but it could be a fake, of course.
Okay, thanks. And the next question is, what EDR solution did your company use?
I'm not sure I'm okay to disclose it because EDR didn't catch it, actually. EDR was just, it was another, because it had no detection at all among every solution out there except the one from China, which has a very noisy false positive. But I'm not sure if I can.
Okay, no worries. And the last question. In your opinion, is disabling macros for Office too much of a nuisance for employees and the wider business? They always seem to be at the root of these incidents.
Exactly. A lot of campaigns, not only APT, but massive mass email senders are using obfuscated Office macros, using PowerShell to finally injecting a DLL into processes this is a problem. And as a computer engineer, I never used Office macro for work, so I think it's okay. But I only have small career of computer software developer or security researcher, and there might be some businesses that actually use Office macros, but I never saw one yet, except for one case. There's a stock predicting service. So they share their Office files, Excel files, to show what kind of stock is going to rise. They predict. They were using heavy Office macros.
Okay, and one just came in. It's not a question, but it's appreciation. They just want to thank you for all your research and for sharing it with all the audience. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.